Today's session will discuss few more Selenium interview questions. So let's get started. So first topic that we'll discuss is explain the difference between find element and find elements. This is one of the most common basic interview question that interviewer might ask you. Like, what is the difference between find element and find elements? So in Selenium, find element and find elements are the methods used to locate the elements on a web page. While both methods are essential for interacting with web elements, they serve different purposes and have different behaviors. Now, what is the purpose of find element method? Find element method is used to locate a single web element. If the element is found, it returns the first matching element on the page. Now, what happens if the element is not found? If the element is not found, it throws a no such element exception. Okay. Some of the key characteristics of find element methods are it returns a single web element, then it throws no such element exception if no matching element is found, and this is suitable when you are certain that elements you are looking for is unique on the page, or when you only need to find the first match. That means if the element is unique, or there is no other element, or there is no list of elements, then this element is mostly used, find element. Now, on the contrary, we'll see like what is the purpose of find elements. The find elements method is used to locate elements, to locate multiple elements, multiple web elements. It returns a list of all matching elements. If no elements is found, it returns an empty list rather than throwing in exceptions. So interviewer might ask you like, what is the return type of find elements method? You should say that the return type is empty because it will not throw any exception. Okay, because it is always returning a list of elements, matching elements. It will always return an empty return type. Okay, it will not throw any exception. While find elements always looks for unique element. So if the element does not present, then it will return an exception, which is no such element exception. Okay, so finally, in conclusion, what is the major difference of these two? So major difference is find elements is a method when you can expect only one match and you want to immediately fail the test if the element is not found. Whereas find elements is it is used a method when dealing with list of elements or when you want to handle the absence of elements without exception. Now understanding the difference between these methods basically helps a tester to choose the right approach for interacting with the web elements, thus improving the robustness and readability of the testing scripts. Okay, you will need these two methods very much when you are actually automating a web page using Selenium WebDriver. Let's move on to the next question. So next question is how to handle synchronization in Selenium WebDriver. So this is very common question that normally you can find, and there are different ways to handle synchronization. First is like there are different weights actually. So in Selenium, we normally use different types of weights to locate an web element. First is implicit weight, and the next is explicit weight. Okay, and finally it is fluent weight. So let's get started. It is basically a wait that is used to that instruct Selenium WebDriver to wait for a certain amount of time before throwing a no such element exception. Okay, this wait is applied globally to all elements in the WebDriver instance. Means once you launch the Selenium WebDriver or once you launch the Chrome browser, basically it will wait for the entire DOM elements to launch. Now if the DOM is not launching, or if the um, DOM elements is not launching, then it will throw a no such element exception. So there is a wait time that we should provide that is called as implicit wait. Okay. Now next is explicit waits. Explicit waits allow you to wait for a specific condition to occur before proceeding to the next step. you can wait for an element to be clickable, visible, or present. So suppose your browser is launched and you are searching for a specific element, then we need to use explicit wait. So waiting for that particular element, let's say login element, okay, let's say username text box or password text box. So the waiting for that element, okay, browser driver will wait for then that element. That waiting time is actually explicit wait. Okay. Now there is another concept is fluent wait. Fluent wait basically provides more flexibility than explicit waits by allowing you to hold for a certain condition with a specific frequency until the condition is met or timeout occurs. So here there is a polling interval. Okay. For example, you are downloading a file. So in that case, fluent wait will be applicable because driver will basically wait until the file gets downloaded. Okay. So there is a polling interval. Okay. Now in that case, we should use fluent wait. Next is thread.sleep. While not recommended for regular use due to static wait nature, thread.sleep can be used in certain scenarios where other synchronization techniques are not feasible. That means your first priority should be implicit waits, explicit waits, and fluent waits. If these three waits are not applicable or not feasible, then you should go for thread sleep. Okay. There are some other wait times we should give, that is page load timeout and script timeout. We'll take a look at the end of the session when we write the code. In summary, finally in summary, implicit wait is basically used for a global timeout for all elements, while explicit waits are basically used for specific condition for individual elements. Okay, so it will wait for a specific element um, to get tracked. Okay, then fluent wait like offers more flexibility in the polling frequency and exceptions to ignore. Avoid using thread.sleep as it can lead to unnecessary delays and flaky tests. So it is recommended that we should avoid thread.sleep because there is a lagging period. Okay. Now, based on your automation tests, you can choose a synchronization techniques. Okay, on your specific requirements and the behavior of application under test to ensure stable and reliable test execution. So let's move on to the next slide. Next slide is how to perform test execution in TestNG. So we all know that TestNG is a unit testing framework that is widely used for Java Selenium automation. So in that case, in this case, like what is the parallel test execution in TestNG? Okay, and that is one of the basic advantage of TestNG, that it allows parallel test execution. Okay, and in that case, like the basic benefit is you can run multiple tests simultaneously, which can significantly reduce the total execution time, especially when dealing with large test suites. SNG provides various ways to achieve parallel execution, including running tests, classes, methods, and suites in parallel. Now, like how to perform parallel tests in TestNG. First is you need to configure a TestNG XML. Okay, like create a TestNG XML file where you can define your test suites and specify a parallel execution mode. Okay. Next is configure parallelism types. Like in the TestNG XML, you should configure your parallelism types. Like TestNG supports different types of parallel execution modes. Okay, so you can basically give like parallel tests, parallel classes, parallel methods, and parallel instances. So execution happens in parallel for all the test methods, then in parallel for all test classes, in parallel for all test methods, and in parallel for all test instances. So what is parallel execution in test level? First is, as we mentioned, create test XML, test ng XML configuration. Then we should run the test suite, test ng suite, like execute the test ng XML configuration file. Okay, and test ng XML, as I mentioned, it's a test suite where you can. So in summary, like parallel execution test in TestNG can be achieved at different levels such as test, class, methods, or programmatically using data providers. Okay, so data provider is also an annotation which is widely used in TestNG for parameterizing or running parallel test execution. So by configuring TestNG XML file appropriately or by using add data provider annotation, you can significantly reduce your test execution time by leveraging multi-threading capabilities. Okay, so we'll go through this in the code. Plus, in TestNG XML file, you can basically adjust a thread count attribute to control the number of concurrent threads for parallel execution. Now, next question is very important. What is tail element reference exception and how to handle it? Now, tail element reference exception basically occurs in Selenium when an element that was previously located in the web page is no longer attached to the DOM. Okay, DOM means document object model. This can happen for several reasons, such as either the element has been deleted or it doesn't exist, element has been replaced by another element, or the page has refreshed or navigated to a different page. So in such case, any operation performed on previously located element will result in stale element reference exception. Now, stale element reference exception occurs when an element is no longer attached to the DOM. As we discussed, like to handle this exception, you can use techniques such as creating a try-catchy block with the attempt. So your code should be, it is one of the best practices that whenever you write a code, you should write that code inside a try-catchy block. Okay. Next is using explicit wait. As we mentioned, the explicit wait is like it is using WebDriver explicit wait to wait for element to be present. So to locate an element, okay, using explicit wait is another good idea to avoid stale element reference exception. Then retry mechanism. You can loop to retry locating and interacting with the element. You can use iRetry analyzer concept, which is one of the test ng listener to basically loop to retry locating and interacting with the element. Now, this strategy basically can ensure that Selenium test can handle dynamic content changes and improve test stability. So let's get started, friends. So I'll instantiate the main method. Okay, then I'll just mention like WebDriver. So here I'm using Selenium 4 WebDriver Manager dot Chrome driver dot wait. Okay, setup. Then we should write like WebDriver driver is equal to new Chrome driver. Okay, right. Yeah, this is the WebDriver interface. We should write it like this. Next is once it is done, then we can basically call driver dot get, okay, https. We can write any of the website. Okay, for example, I'm just not writing an exam any specific website. I'm just mentioning like example.com. You can give like google.com or facebook.com, whichever website you want to automate. Then we need to write basically the implicit wait. So implicit wait, as I mentioned, it basically waits for entire page to load, entire document object model to load. See, normally it is advisable we should give 10 seconds. If the page doesn't load, you can increase the time, implicit wait time. You can give 20 or 30 seconds. Then you can mention something like if you are trying to locate an element, we should use WebDriver, web element. Then element is equal to driver dot find element. As I mentioned, find element the method, okay, which basically is an abstract class. You can see, and then you can just say by dot xpath, and then you can mention your xpath. Let's say element ID. Anything you can mention. When you're automating, you should give your appropriate XPath using the Chrome driver tools. Then you can just say, um, you can mention something like element.text. Text. Okay. So getText method is a method that is used to find the element text, that is more widely used for string. Then next is we should, in case of find elements, we should basically create a list object. Okay, list, because it's more than one element, as we discussed. Elements. Then we should again say driver dot find elements by dot id. So you can give any XPath. Normally, if you just give, if you just click dot, you will see XPath, IDs, class name, name, tag name, all kind of locators you will get. Accordingly, whichever you are preferring, you can choose. Okay, ID. Then element, you can use your element ID, and then now next is, once you get a list of web elements, you basically need to iterate between all elements. So you will create a for loop. So you have to iterate between the web element. So we'll iterate the web element. Okay, this is called an enhanced for loop. And then you can say that's how you will write your. Okay. So that's the main difference between find elements and find element. So find elements always find single element, while find elements looks for list of web elements. Okay, that's the main difference. Now, next thing which we discussed is how to. This is implicit wait we discussed. So if you want to use like page load timeout, you can use that. Okay. Similarly, there is another timeout we discussed, what set script timeout. Okay, you can also use that, but widely we use implicit timeout, implicit wait, implicitly wait. Okay? That's widely used. That's first preference. Next is we discussed like explicit wait. So explicit wait we should use WebDriver interface like WebDriver wait. As you know, it's once you click WebDriver wait, basically is an interface which extends Fluent wait. You can see here. So it's interface, and then wait is equal to new WebDriver wait. Now here you can call your driver object and give like 10 seconds waiting time to locate the web element. As we mentioned, like once DOM is loaded, if you are if you're trying to find a specific web element, you should use web explicit wait. So that's how you should write your code, like WebDriver wait. It's called a new WebDriver wait, then driver comma and the time which you want to wait. Okay. Now you should use this wait object until. So until is basically if you just hover it, you will see until is a class. Okay, and then should use expected conditions. So what is expected condition? Expected condition is an interface. You can see we are using expected condition in the interface. Okay, and then we'll call like conditions dot. We'll use these are the methods we should be using, abstract methods, something like presence of element located, and then visibility of element located. You can use any of the methods. Let's say I want to mention that element should be visible before I can click it. Okay, then you can give the element, let's say element id. Okay, that's how you this is basically explicit wait, where it will basically search for the element id and make sure the element is visible before you can proceed for finding the element. Okay, that's the way we should. You can use something, another method called as element to be clickable also you can use. Okay, so that's how normally we write for the explicit wait. Now if you want to write like fluent wait, what is basically a fluent wait? In this case, let's discuss that also. So for fluent wait, as I mentioned, it is explicitly used because it has a polling interval. It waits for the specific job to complete. Okay, for that we can basically create a function, something like um, let's say we can mention like public static void fluent wait. Okay, so if I want to, let's say I'm downloading a specific file, okay, and I want to wait for that download to complete. So I should give that file. I should I should basically call the file object. So I should give a argument of file. Okay, and then file, and then amount of time I should wait, int timeout in seconds, in timeout seconds. Okay, should give that. Then should mention something like um, we should create global variables. Let's say I should public static web driver, then driver, and then I should also create another two variable, public static um, fluent wait web driver. I should give something the name of the object if wait. So I've made the global variable. So I should now this section I'll keep on top of public static void main. Okay, so these are static variables. So we'll keep it outside of public static void main, and then we should call this if wait. So since this is a static variable, it can be used anywhere. So I can mention something like new fluent wait. Okay, and then I should call my driver object. Okay, then dot, I should say with dot with timeout. Okay, I should give duration dot of seconds. And then I can call this timeout seconds. So um I want to wait for a specific time before it will time out. Then next I should write polling, as I mentioned, polling interval. So we should mention something like duration dot of milliseconds. So 500. Let's say I'm giving 500, and then I'm just saying ignoring no such element dot exception class or stale element reference exception, okay, dot class. This is a standard way to write fluent wait. So, and then finally we should write another section which is wait dot until then WebDriver file exists. So friends, here you can see I've created a WebDriver function. So sorry, fluent wait functions. So here I'm given a timeout in seconds. So and then I also given a polling interval. So let's say 500. So every 500 seconds, it will keep on checking whether download of a file is completed or not. That will check, and it will ignore any kind of no such field exceptions or stale element reference exception. And then it will also check whether actually the file which I'm actually downloading it exists or not. That also it will check. This is a standard function for fluent wait, which we can use in our code, and then we can basically use this function to write our code. So let's say if you want to write a fluent wait, so you can mention something like web element, okay, element. So I'm trying to use it, so we can basically use this fluent wait object basically to wait for a specific element. Also, apart from downloading the file, you can use it in other place also. Expected conditions, okay, dot visibility of element located, okay, by id or any of the locators you can give, and then element id. So that's how you can basically use your fluent wait. And then you can mention element dot click. These weights are very important because there is a lot of chances that execution will fail. So appropriately using wait is very important in the code. Okay. Now, in case of file downloading, you can create a file object. Okay. Then you can basically give a path where you want to download the file. So let's say system dot get property. Okay. And then you can give something like user dot dir. Okay, plus you can use plus, so it should be in double quotes. Okay, and then you can give something like the exact path of your something like test output. You can, and then you can get a download folder where you want to download the file. Okay, And okay, okay, now in downloading case, like how you can use Fluent Wait, that's what we were discussing. So first, like you can mention something like if your directory exists, then only download can proceed. So you can create something like this, and here you can call your Fluent Wait. So you can call your Fluent Wait function. This function you can call. So I would suggest always give a lowercase when you're creating a function. Okay, then dot. You can use something like dir dot timeout in seconds. You can mention something like 60. This is what, since we have passed two arguments here, we should keep the directory path of the file and also the timeout in seconds. That's how I'm calling the Fluent Wait driver. And then once file is downloaded, how you will verify the file is actually existing. So you can just use like list all files. So list all files is a method that you can use from the file. So you can use this file class. File class will have a method called list files. You can use that, and you can basically print the length of the file. So once you print the file length of the file, you can basically easily locate that something has been downloaded. That's how you can basically confirm that your Fluent Wait has been appropriately used and file has been successfully downloaded. Okay. Now next we'll focus on TestNG, like how to parameterize test cases. So parameterizing test cases, you can use something called as add data provider. So add data provider, you should be creating something called as uh, a TestNG add data provider function. Okay, so I'll suggest first you write the function. So you create a two-dimensional object. Okay, then you can mention something called as provide me the data function name. So this add data provider you can call your you can basically use for your calling test data from Excel sheet. You can easily use this add data provider function. Okay, and you can use something called as return um, new new object. So this will give me, okay, I'll just say, and don't forget to mention something which is driver.quit. Once your execution is completed, we should always mention driver.quit. Okay, so this is a two-dimensional array. You can array a function where you can basically return the objects. Let's say I want to return something like uh, data one. Okay, or you can say something like this. You can return like multiple datas. Okay, and then you can use this data to feed into your project. Let's say username. You are fetching username from the Excel sheet. You can feed into your functions. So that will discuss like how you can do that. To do that, you need to annotate using at testing annotation. Okay, and then since data provider is a at testing annotation, you should use the name of the data provider. You should probably name it and then use this name to put it in your function. So how will you do that? Suppose you are creating a function. Let's say I'm using, let's say, let me show here. Let's say I'm using a testng framework and I want to use this at data provider for a specific function. So I'll create something like public void test method. Okay, and then we should use something called a string data. Then sys out println. We should print it. Now to do that, so this we need to close here. Okay, to do that, we should be creating a testng and we should annotate it with at test. We should use at test, and then we should also use your add data provider and then test data. That's how you can do that. So here you can see like I am passing a string variables. Okay, this string variable, the string argument, it will take the data from here, and then it will, you can use this data inside your function. Let's say you want to put the username like send keys username. You can put this data into the send keys and basically continue your automation. So another way we can do it is using testng XML. So testng XML, as I mentioned, like you can basically create a testng XML file. Okay, and then we can, so this is a testng XML file. So you can see like it has different tags. Let's say test, and then classes, and then suit. So you can do it like this, and like you want to give, you want to name the suit name, and then you want to give like how you want to parameterize. Okay, and then you want to give thread counts, and then let's say if you want to parameterize any testng based on number of classes, you can give it like this: class name, class name, class name. So all three classes can execute together. Okay, similarly you can give um, you can also do something like method level. So also, so in that case you should give like you can pass here methods. Okay, and you can also like do it in terms of um, classes. Okay, you can also give something like instances. That's how you can basically parameterize your SNG configurations, and you can basically parameterize your tests. Okay, so I think we have covered mostly in this session. So thank you very much, friends. I hope this session was useful to you. If you like it, please subscribe my channel. Once again, thank you very much.